Well, hi, this is John Sarver, and this is another My Solar Story presentation sponsored by Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association and the Michigan Solar Users Network. And Dale Klein's going to give us an interesting presentation tonight because he's going to talk about his home in Hartland Township, which has both a grid-tied and an off-grid system. I should mention also that the GLREA is having our annual meeting on Saturday, December 5th. We're going to have a very interesting program this year. We're going to have a panel of folks from the solar industry talking about what's going on in the solar industry in Michigan. And also we're going to have Dan Scripps, who's the chairman of the Michigan Public Service Commission, talking about the latest information related to utilities in the state of Michigan, and Jigar Shah, who's going to give us some perspective on national developments. I know him best from the Energy Gang podcast, which I listen to every week. But Jigar Shah has been involved with alternative energy, renewable energy for decades, and is kind of a national guru. So I was glad we were able to get him for our December 5th annual meeting. If you're interested, just go to the glrea.org website and you can register for the meeting. There's a $25 registration fee. That'll be Saturday, December 5th from kind of late morning to early afternoon. So hey, with that, let me turn it over to Dale, and please mute yourself until Dale's done with his presentation. And then you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask Dale questions. Hey, thanks, Dale, for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, John, for setting these up. These are, I enjoy listening to these either live or watching them later on YouTube. So this is our house. The service from DTE comes in on the east end here, and it conveniently faces south. And when we moved to the house originally, pretty soon after, we installed a grid-tied conventional type of system on the main part of the house that's 4.7 kilowatts. And that was under the Solar Currents program with DTE. And then more recently, in this past year or so, I've added an off-grid system in the garage with panels on the garage roof most recently. And before that, the first ones I set up down in the garden. Kind of hard to see in this picture, but there's 3 kilowatts there, half kilowatt on the camper, because we had 2 panels on the camper already. And I just hooked those up into the system also. And then 3.7 on the garage roof. There's kind of a different collection of different kinds of panels on the whole system. There's microinverters on some of it. There's a battery backup inverters from SMA in the garage, and there's a few Midnight Solar devices around too. There's batteries that are lead acid batteries in the garage. There's Nissan Leaf batteries that I'm going to hook up to it at some point, but I haven't gotten to that part yet. And we have a Nissan Leaf that we charge, and also a couple of GE things that are fun to play with. And some of the things people that I call my sponsors, I guess, is DC Solar is a company that went bankrupt, and I was able to get some equipment from auctions to set this up. Mid-Michigan Solar was the original installer of our grid-tied system. And then DT, of course, with their Solar Currents program was really good for a while. Sort of a general overview or a timeline. 2010 is when we moved into the house, and it was mostly electric to start with, only natural gas for heat, which we don't use very much. We have a wood stove in the main part of the house, and it doesn't really cost too much to heat. The natural gas doesn't get used all that much. And I pretty early on replaced the water heater with a heat pump water heater from GE. That's been a lot of fun to use, and it's pretty efficient. And then in 2011, we were able to get into this Solar Currents program, and that was probably a good payback. It's a 20-year contract, which was net metered, at least at the beginning. And then in 2015 to 18 is when I realized that I was going to lose net metering. and I protested. It seemed to me that the solar currents contract specified 20 years of net metering and other renewable energy credit payments, but it didn't work out that way. The Public Service Commission didn't rule in my favor on that issue. So I decided that the cost difference, what I'm effectively losing each year by having distributed generation versus net metering is somewhere in the $300 to $400 range. And so that gave me at least the personal license to go and spend at least that much to add to the system or modify it so that I don't have to rely on outflow and inflow back from DTE so much in the future. And I can also cover some existing additional loads that my earlier system wasn't really sized for. Having a new electric vehicle, and the water heater was always on a separate meter also. So then in the last year or two, we have this electric car, and I put a bigger battery in the car. That entailed taking out the original battery, which then I kept to use for stationary storage, and also to set up in an electric lawnmower from the 1970s. That's a fun project. So in the summertime, the idea is that you're going to have excess energy in the summer. You might as well use it right away to mow the lawn instead of using gas. And then there's 7.5 kilowatts of solar capacity that's added to this off-grid system. I'm not sure exactly about how this will pay back exactly, but since I did it all myself and some of the equipment is used or from these bankruptcy auctions, it was not really prohibitively expensive to do this. And so there's used panels on the garage roof, and I also got a lot of used N-phase microinverters that still worked actually. So in 2010, this is a picture of the water heater in the basement. It captures waste heat from the natural gas boiler, and I also ducted the electric dryer so that the waste heat from the dryer and the humidity, the moisture from drying the clothes, gets taken out of the air and condensed by the water heater. And I added a thermostat which tricks the water heater into running when there is warm air in this space, whether it comes from the boiler being on or because we're running the dryer. It pretty much right away turns on the water heater, and the water heater runs until it consumes all of the warm air in this space, and it shuts off back to whatever the original set point temperature is. The water heater is doing fine so far. It's still running after 10 years. Some of these early ones, people didn't have necessarily great luck with. I think this is one of the earlier kind of widely available home use conventional looking water heaters that are heat pump systems. So then in 2011 is when we had Mid-Michigan Solar install this roof mounted system. They did a really great job, but the N-phase inverters started to fail within about 2 years, and by that time the installer had closed up shop. I think it was just sort of the boom and bust conditions of DTE's program, and Consumers Energy had a program during that time. And without those programs, solar didn't necessarily make so much economic sense to the typical person. And so they had a lot of installs for a while, and then there were fewer installations. So they were one of the ones who went under because of that. All of these inverters I've been able to replace under warranty. It's not too much trouble to replace them yourself, as long as you can get on your roof and undo a panel and remove it and replace it. This roof is pretty easy to work on. It's not a big deal. And I was always able to get warranty replacements from N-phase. all of the newer inverters from say 2016 and on, I haven't had any of these that have failed. But the older ones from 2010 through maybe 2013 or 14, a lot of those have failed. All of ours failed. I've also separately gotten used Enphase microinverters from Matt Cadwell at Sumter Solar Services. They're an installer that's been around for a while, and they're still around and they're growing. I think they would do a great job for you if you're looking for an installer. They've upgraded a lot of systems that had Enphase inverters to the newer ones. And so I was sorting through the used ones to give back to him, ones that he can use for other projects, and then using ones on my new system from there. So you have to sort through a lot of them to find ones that are still good, but they're pretty low cost. This is this is the diagram of the rooftop of the grid-tied rooftop system. Out at the east end of the house, the grid comes into the main meter. At that time, there were two separate interruptible meters for the water heater and the air conditioning. Those I've recently removed and just put those appliances on the main part of the service. So it goes to a service panel on the outside of the house, and the main feed goes through the basement in conduit over to all of the loads in the basement, this other panel. And the roof, the grid-tied part on the roof is all sort of external to the house. It goes through conduit, through the attic, and comes down to a combiner box on the outside of the house. And then there's another circuit that goes back into the house just for the monitoring device, the Envoy. And then there's a disconnect and the generation meter that DTE pays as part of the solar currents program. If you got into it in 2010 through possibly 2012, you get ongoing payments for the whole 20 years of 11 cents a kilowatt hour. And the beauty of this is if it goes out to the grid or whether I use it in the house, it doesn't matter. It was generated on DTE's system, and they're able to use those renewable energy credits to meet their portfolio standards. And they compensate us for that. So that's about it. I still recommend Enphase, especially all of the newer inverters should really be fine. And it just has a lot of good features about how the system is set up, and it's all just AC wiring and breakers. It's really flexible to do, especially to do your own. It can be pretty flexible that way. So then in 2015, we lost net metering. I complained about it. If there's anybody in a similar boat, I'd be happy to talk about it, and maybe someone else would be more successful. I could have maybe provided some additional evidence up front. You have to provide your evidence first, and then everybody makes their arguments, and you can't produce any more further evidence to support any new arguments or anything that you want to say. It's only based on what you say up front, and there's no going back, at least in one complaint case. So instead of being frustrated with that, I decided to spend at least that this amount over 10 years. I'll see what I can do with that to make our system better when we get moved to distributed generation. And I found out about the DC solar auctions in late 2019, and that really made me decide to go ahead and do that. So I also happened to retire at the end of 2018, so I had time to work on other projects. So first I found that I found a 62 kilowatt hour battery that would fit in my existing Leaf, and I removed the original of that in the lawnmower instead of lead acid batteries that it would have had originally. And the rest of it is going to go into the garage as part of the off-grid system. currently the off-grid system is based on all the components from this solar trailer. So there's 10 panels, and then inside this front box are two big inverters that can run most people's houses, as long as you don't try to do anything too crazy like run the air conditioning and the dryer and the dishwasher. If you try to run everything at once, okay, it might tap those out, but they're really capable. And two really large forklift batteries, and depending on how deeply you discharge them, they would have more or less usable capacity. I'm not discharging them very much. I'm discharging somewhere between 10 and 15 kilowatt hours a day, and then charging back up each day. That's taking them down to somewhere around 80% or so from as full as they can get the previous day. So I brought that home and took it apart and put it all on the wall in the garage. So these are the two SMA Sunny Island inverters. That's kind of the core of the system. And those convert AC power to or from the 48 volt lead acid battery, which is in this plywood sealed box. And there's venting that goes out. There's an exhaust fan. And there's a heat exchanger that's built into this pipe. So there's not any thermal difference too much between the inlet and the outlet air. And they're also both go to the same side of the garage outside. So if the wind's blowing, there shouldn't be a pressure differential. And so far that seems to work really great. The AC wiring comes through this conduit and goes into a loads panel that's in the garage, and then conduit that goes down through the basement to the opposite corner, and it comes to the original grid panel, which was in the house. And I added a new loads panel next to it, and I took most all of the circuit into this new panel. And so the loads panel in the basement and the loads panel in the garage, some of the circuits that were already at this end of the house at the garage, I rerouted into this panel to free up some space down here in the basement. So now there's extra room down here. Both of these panels can be powered either by the inverters or from the grid. There's a pair of interlocked breakers at the top of both of these panels that can feed the whole panel from either source if you want to. But normally these panels, the whole house really is being fed from the output of the Sunny Islands. And then the panels on the garage roof and the garden, some of the ones on the garage roof, those are AC coupled, and they come down into this panel, or other ones on the garage roof are DC coupled. They come down through the conduit here to a charge controller that directly charges the battery. I did that because I had this charge controller and it was part of the trailer. And in the future, I'm going to have a second lithium battery here with the Nissan Leaf cells. So this will be the main charging mechanism for that battery pack. Then I'll have another set of inverters some other inverters to take power overnight from the lithium batteries to run the house, instead of cycling the lead acid very much on a daily basis. The panels down in the garden, these are all AC coupled with microinverters behind each panel, goes underground through conduit back to the shed, and then comes up back in the garage and gets into this conduit here too. The panels from the trailer are all right here on the original rack. So it came with the panels, and it came with a nice ground mount rack that I can tilt the panels seasonally, and it's just ballasted with a bunch of bricks so it can't blow over. And that's the stuff I set up first. Then just a couple of months ago, I decided, well, let's put some more on the garage roof, and I got these 12 panels used and bought all the new racking and everything else that I needed, and put these on the garage. Um, so next I'm going to be adding the leaf battery packs to it. And also I need some more management to handle kind of integration issues with it. Like when when the lead acid battery is nearing full, it doesn't accept very much charge. So I need to go quick right away, make sure that I'm charging the car. Otherwise, the solar panels get shut off. The power is wasted. So I, on a daily basis, go out and do that. Um, and I also need to change the settings in the Sunny Island inverters so that during the day, it will charge the batteries as much as it can. So I open up the charge limit so that it'll accept as much as all of these panels can put out. But then at night, if it hasn't been a sunny day and the state of charge gets low, I want it to connect to the grid and supply all the loads in the house, but don't charge the batteries. So the only way to do that is to set the charge limit for the batteries low to 10 amps. So then it just kind of barely charges the batteries during the night. In the future, at some point soon, I'm going to have some home automation type of stuff that will communicate with the SMAs, with the Sunny Island inverters, and change the settings in those automatically. That will handle most of it. And then I also need to do something with at least the vehicle charger, the EV charger, so that it will turn on when there's solar power available. If you charge too much, then you end up just taking it back out of the lead acid batteries. You don't want to do that on a daily basis. So the panels in the upper left, these are all the AC coupled ones, and they come down through either back into the loads panel directly in the garage, or the ones in the garden come through, and they come through that conduit and they come all the way back over into this other small distribution box, which is the main output of the Sunny Island inverters. The Sunny Island inverters have two AC ports. Each Sunny Island puts out 120 volts relative to neutral, and they do opposite each other. So between the two of them, it's 240 volts. And they supply power to this little breaker panel. And one breaker feeds the basement panel, and the other breaker feeds the garage panel. And a third breaker is what is connected to all the microinverters down in the garden, and also to a second envoy back in the house next to the other one. Because these two systems are separate, this one, the bottom grid one, is always on the grid. The top one, it is not necessarily synchronized with the grid, and it's not connected. They're isolated. So I need two separate systems to monitor them. But that's another item that I got used from somebody locally. So far, that all works great. When the state of charge is low, depending on how you set things, the Sunny Islands can connect to the grid on this other AC input. Inside the inverter is just a relay. And so first they synchronize this AC waveform with what it sees on the grid side. When it sees that they're matched up, it closes the relay, and then everything is connected to the grid at that point. All of your loads are connected to the grid. And you can you can set these to either connect only in order to charge, and that's how I have it set. Or in other systems, you can also set these to feed back to the grid, but it's not really set up for doing that. It would effectively just be discharging the batteries to do that, and I don't want to do that. And I'm not back feeding back to the grid through this system. This is all separate. So that's the main idea. I did these two parts of it, some of it AC coupled and some of it DC coupled with a regular charge controller, just because I had this stuff. And then on the garage roof is a very short run. This is only 15 feet of conduit from underneath the panels straight down to this charge controller and right into the battery. It would be kind of impossible to use this type of charge controller for panels that are way off down in the garden or way at the other end of the house. without having really long DC runs. I have to run extra conduit for. The conduit to go down to the garden, I already had conduit underground going to the shed, and then it was a pretty short distance to put another little bit over to the garden, and that's all AC wires. You can put more AC wires in there, that's fine. You would not want to go and add DC wires in that same underground conduit. So that was the other reason to have those be separate. So another main point of this, which my family, especially Alice, keeps stressing to me, don't think that this is something that's kind of turnkey. Some of my family is very patient and very happy generally, so it's great. But we do have to make some changes. It's mostly transparent the way it is currently. It's just that a couple of different things like charging the car and running the clothes dryer. The clothes dryer is a pretty large load. Running on 240 volts is about 5.5 kilowatts. And that's kind of more than I want to just be pulling out of the battery. I changed it recently so that it runs the heater element only on 120 volts. So that's a much more manageable power draw. If it's sunny out, we can run the dryer. The other day we did this, it was sunny. We didn't want to dry the clothes on the line outside, which we usually do. And we're able to run the dryer without discharging the battery. It was still able to charge the battery a little bit while running the dryer. So I still need to do other kind of integration things like that. So at some point you could read through all these. There's just sort of, I asked, what would you tell other people about going off grid effectively? That's kind of what the house is off grid now, basically. A positive point is you don't have to worry about the power going out. Here it's not so bad. It's only gone off once since I've had the system set up, and that was before I had it all fully integrated. I realized the power went off and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go down to the basement and flip things around and turn it on. And that was good. But we're not really functioning normally here. I am constantly running around checking, hey, what's going on in the garage? Do I need to change some setting in there? And how we use at least some of the high consuming things, the dryer, EV charger, the air conditioner would be another one, except I think that'll be less of an issue because you're only gonna wanna run the air conditioner when it's really hot and probably sunny out. And you don't need to run it all day. You can run it just for a little while. So we don't use it that much anyway. So anyway, think about the impact on your customers if you're gonna do something crazy like this. But it's still been a fun project. Here are some other ideas that I need to do next. Our current situation, we're still net metered, so I'm handling things a particular way, like the grid tie system, especially we're on time of use. So all on-peak power is going out to the grid and is being banked. The off-peak power from the grid tied system, I generally end up pulling all of that back in. It's still one-to-one. I can have it back whenever. So that's what I'm using overnight to support the loads if the battery didn't get recharged. I won't need to do that as much once I get more battery capacity set up, because on sunny days I'm already, I don't have enough storage for all of the energy that the panels can produce unless I fully charge the car. Like in the summertime, it's probably going to be keeping the car full all the time. Wintertime, it's not an issue right now. I could put more panels on the roof at some point, potentially. Yeah, controls integration, having some automation to do the things that I have to run around now and punch numbers on the inverters. I was joking, and it's kind of true actually, that the buttons on the inverters to press, I feel like I'm getting carpal tunnel syndrome from going out there and pressing the buttons. There's only 4 buttons. You have to press them to go through the menus. And I do that frequently. So I think that's about all my main points there. If anybody has questions, go ahead and just unmute yourself and let me know what I can talk about more.
Yeah, why don't you stop the screen sharing so we can see everybody?
Yep.
I guess I got a question for you, Dale. The way you were talking, it sounds like if you had a power outage from DTE, you'd be fine for maybe forever with the system you've got set up. Would you expect any problems if you didn't get any power at all from DTE?
No, no. I mean, maybe in the middle of wintertime if you had a series of cloudy days, but currently I'm not really using the grid tied system, especially during peak weekdays. I'm letting all that go out to the grid. Um, with the amount of solar, I don't think, especially won't be an issue if I'm able to use the grid tied system to charge back to the house also. It's just, I'll definitely be doing that when we get switched to distributed generation. I will be kind of almost slightly the opposite of the way I'm handling it now. In the future, off-peak energy, you get very little benefit to send that out. So on weekends, I will try to consume everything that I can in the house. On weekdays, if there's still leftover, then okay, you could send that out to the grid, and at least because we're on time of use, and so the on-peak outflow credit is still 15 cents or so. Still don't want to do that because you get that as a credit, but it's only for power supply. You still have to pay delivery 7 or 8 cents to get any of your own electricity back.
Okay, other questions from anybody? Go ahead.
Hi, it's Karen Furiel. It sounds like you spend a lot of time twitching the system. How much time do you spend on a daily basis?
I'm usually just watching to see whether it's sunny out or not. And then in the morning when I get up and the evening after the sun goes down, I go and change. I change one setting mostly. I change the charge limit on the battery so that if it connects during the night to the grid because the state of charge has gotten low, then it will connect to the grid, but it won't charge. And so it just takes a minute to do that. That's mostly all I'm really doing, but I'm still kind of learning and deciding how I want the system to behave and what I want it to do. So it's a good hobby. I could leave it at any point. Like a few times I've taken a trip or whatever and left everybody at home for days in a row, and the system is fine. You just set it the way you want, and it's fine. You just can't do the thing like I'm doing now about don't charge very fast at night. You need to leave it set the other way. So.
Yeah, Dale, this is Roger. You have a lot of different kinds of panels in your system. Have you had any issues at all with balancing the output of those different panels?
Well, since each one is on a microinverter, there's not really any balancing to do. The ones on the garage roof are all the same.
Oh, okay.
Each array is all the same kind of panel.
Okay, that helps.
It's only like the ones down in the garden. There's one separate panel that I got for free that was broken and I repaired. That's got one microinverter, and then there's 5 smaller panels that are all matched. They're from the 1990s and they still work. Those are set up with microinverters also. So there's not really any issues with matching.
Yeah, okay. If all your array are the same,
Yeah.
that's good, okay.
Yeah,
And then one of the technical questions, what are you going to do about the high voltage of the leaf battery? How is that going to be integrated into your system?
So the leaf battery, there are systems, there are high voltage inverters you can get that could work with an electric vehicle battery in its original configuration, but you'd have 300 or 400 volts that you'd have to be really careful of. So typically most people would convert it, take it apart, which I already have taken apart anyway, and reconfigure it into some other voltage pack. So it'll be it'll be a 48 volt pack. The cells that I put in the lawnmower is a 36 volt pack, and the Nissan Leaf cells are really great modules are great because they each have bolt-on terminals. You stack them together, you just bolt them together so that they don't, so that they're compressed correctly, and make your own or whatever bus bars to connect them the way you need to. And it's pretty straightforward to do that. I'll need to have a BMS to manage, to keep the cells balanced, or at least check that they stay balanced. And that's some of what I've done on the lawn tractor battery pack.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Could I ask a question?
Yep, sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
So this is actually Eric Max. It's my wife's name on there, but
Hi, Eric.
so hi. So with the, I've got a Ford Energy and a C-Max Energy, and it seems that now I've had the car for 8 years, and just in the last 6 months, I think I've lost some battery capacity. Now with the Leaf batteries, are there different qualities of batteries out there that different manufacturers are using for the durability, for the life?
Yeah, I think probably every one is different. I think it has a lot to do with how the particular car is designed and how it was treated. Nissan Leaf batteries are actually kind of not so great for degradation depending on where the car is used. If it's in hotter temperatures, the Nissan Leaf doesn't have any thermal management to speak of. It's relying on thermal mass. This car, it was my dad's in New York State, and it was kept in a garage and didn't really get a lot of use. So the capacity is still really great.
Okay.
But even if they're degraded, if you replace the battery in your car with a newer one under warranty or some other way, then vehicle batteries are great for making your own energy storage system, because even if they have lower capacity, they still have a lot of capacity, and they're still way better than lead acid in general, for just different reasons. You have to be careful that you have to handle them correctly. They have to have a BMS so that you don't overcharge or undercharge them, and they could catch on fire. It is the worst failure mode probably. But any battery, lead acid has bad failure modes too if you don't vent them properly.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, are you an electrical engineer?
No, not an electrical engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I worked in the auto industry.
Okay.
And I've just always done everything around the house myself for the most part.
Sure.
And generally it's not too difficult to figure out how to do things, how to do all this correctly. It's good to have some other people look at it with you if possible. That would be a good idea too.
And then I guess one other thing. So when you're running off of batteries as your power for the house, do you have to be concerned with the power not being sufficient? Like if you're trying to run the air conditioner, can you harm appliances?
Typically, no. But when I first set up the system, I had some things hot wired in the house to backfeed, and it did actually cause, due to some issues with how the original house wiring was set up, and the way the smaller wire that I was using, I did actually cause a voltage spike, which I blew up a couple of different things in the house, which I got to fix. But typically, no. Once the system is set up correctly and installed properly, as long as you don't, the inverters have enough capacity, and these inverters have a lot of surge capacity also. They can easily start any of the devices in the house. The well pump, it doesn't even know that it happens. The air conditioning compressor, it starts no problem. You might see lights like flicker a little tiny bit, but even on the grid, you can see things like that if you pay attention. It's more a matter of making sure that you don't run a large load for a long time when you only have a lead acid battery that you really shouldn't take that much energy out of. Once I have a lithium battery, and I have more capacity, that won't be so much of a concern for me.
Dale, this is John Gorley. Um, before you started this off-grid project, you said the thing that motivated you was that you were going off of net metering. And I wonder if you thought about putting a battery on the grid tied system and managing it so that you minimize the amount of energy that you sold back to DTE and then bought back.
Yeah, that could be a good idea. If you had I think if you had a lithium battery, you could set that up. I mean, you could put it really anywhere in your house, and you just would need to coordinate that with the production from your grid tied system, and take that energy, just like any grid tied system. The energy from your panels comes first into your house, and your house may use some of it. You just need to set up a battery that would listen to or watch what your solar panels are doing and accept all that power. I didn't really look into that specifically. I don't know if there's a solution like off the shelf that would do that. There might be. I kind of more I wanted to have more solar because we have the EV that is requiring more energy. So I wanted to add more solar for that reason, but adding that on the existing grid tied system with distributed generation, typically you would charge the car when you get home, like overnight or something, and all day long, all your solar would go out to the grid. And I think I would want to, if you had a battery in the house, you could charge that up during the day. But I'd hate to then discharge that battery just to charge into the EV. I don't know. That's one trouble with having a car, right? Charging back and forth. You'd be charging two batteries in order to charge your car that way.
Yeah, Dale, there are some systems starting to come online now that are commercially available for that purpose. Enphase makes one called the N-Charge, and Generac makes one called the Power Cell. And they're designed to do just what you're talking about with integrated lithium batteries and AC coupled systems for your microinverters.
Yep.
So that might be a coming market.
Yeah. I did actually, before I bought this solar trailer, I had the Generac guys come out and give me a quote. And that was further motivation that, well, for the amount that they would charge for that, I definitely, okay, I'm fine with spending something
right.
to set up my own system like that. Those would be a great solution, yeah. And those are pretty neat, yeah.
Well, the price needs to come down for sure.
Yeah, it will eventually, I guess. But it's, you know, if you're talking about having a whole house generator, it's kind of similar to that. And it's not really that much more than having a whole house generator, which people spend a lot of money on sometimes too. But I think they didn't necessarily have, I don't remember exactly how many kilowatt hours of capacity. You could get as much as you wanted, but it wasn't cheap. You adding your own system that you make from a EV, like second life batteries from a car, is a pretty reasonable cost way to do it.
Yeah.
If you're handy that way.
This is John Freeman. We have a member who used to be on a board, Kim, whom John Sarver knows, and she has a business in Grand Rapids where she takes older batteries and is reusing them for solar systems. And
Really?
So she definitely agrees with your analysis that there's totally a market for that. And it's a good way of putting to use old car batteries that can be put to use for a much longer period of time.
I would be interested to find out more about that. Are they disassembling the EV packs and then putting them into some new thing, or are they?
I can't really tell you, Dale. All I can do is send you her email address, and then you can send her an email. And
That'd be great. Yeah.
At some point, maybe John should contact her and invite her to do a solar story, because I do find it interesting. But I think for you and maybe for Roger and John, John Gorley, who are smarter than I am, I think you would enjoy it even more, because you'd understand the science behind what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good idea, John.
The other thing I would say too, with I think there's a lot of opportunity with controlling your loads in your house to do what you can to consume energy directly and reduce how much you send out to the grid when you're on distributed generation, at least. Just like your water heater, your clothes dryer, charging your electric car. Those are all things that if you set up some automation to do that, some products like maybe Tesla's might have some features that would let you do that already. It would really depend on what devices you have.
I think this is John again. As a result of DTE and consumers now trying to lowball, the outflow credit, that I think a lot of businesses now in Michigan are doing exactly what you're talking about, is marketing solar projects to include batteries, so you minimize what you export up to the grid, and you may try and get it all behind the meter. And you may pay a little bit more, or maybe in some cases you don't get as many panels, so you can afford to buy the battery systems. But I also think that as battery systems become even cheaper over time, and we can only hope that the Tesla factory in Nevada gears up and the one in New York gears up, that becomes a reality. And then I think the economics of being behind the meter is even stronger. And then of course the other irony is that the investor-owned utilities are constantly raising their rates for residential use. And so that's only going to make the economics of installing a solar system more attractive over time.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Dale, you mentioned, I think about maybe in the future getting a heat pump system, geothermal, or maybe air to air for your heating and cooling. If you went ahead and did that, would you need a lot more solar, or what's your kind of thinking about moving in that direction, maybe down the road?
Yeah, I would have to figure out how much more I would need. I don't know how much more I would need. There's room for some more panels. The neat thing about heat pumps is that they might take a lot of energy over time, but their power consumption for just to run them is not necessarily that high a power draw to run the compressor. It's more just it's running for a long time. Yeah, I would need to. I don't know how much energy. I can look up how much natural gas we use and how much heat we're using right now in terms of BTUs, and how much if that was provided by heat pumps, how much would it require? But really, I need to do some other basic home projects. Like I could really super insulate a little bit better some parts of the house, and the house still has the original windows. I really should be replacing windows. That would probably pay off better than.
Yeah, the efficiency always pays off better, that's for sure. And yeah, I think you did mention too, aren't you using some wood for heating in the winter?
Yeah, so we're not really spending very much money on natural gas for heat. So it would be hard to justify financially, but it would be nice not having to cut wood. But it's nice to have a toasty fire in the house too. So.
Hey Dale, too, when you got the heat pump for the water heater, did you look at all at on-demand water heaters and made a conscious decision to go with the heat pumps? Or
I didn't really look into the on-demand style. Maybe that would work because you don't have a large amount of heated water sitting there, cooling off all the time. I guess maybe that's part of the benefit of on-demand. but you're still, an on-demand would be a resistance heater. You're just putting the energy directly into the water, where a heat pump is kind of on the order of 3 to 1. You spend kind of 1 unit of energy to move 3 units of heat into the water or the air that you're working on. And so I did do an analysis based on, at first I thought I would put a natural gas water heater in there, was my first thought. I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to do that. But I heard about the heat pump water heaters, and then I just did a spreadsheet with, okay, it's a little more expensive up front, but the house was already set up with an interruptible meter, so you get a little bit lower rate. And then it's sort of the 3-for-1 thing, because it's a heat pump. It's much more efficient to put the heat into the water. So it should have paid back by now, certainly, over a natural gas water heater.
And approximately how much did the heat pump water heater cost you?
I think it might have been, I don't know, on the order of $1,000 or $1,100. There might have been a rebate, and there might have been a tax credit involved at that time. And I think that was still, it was on the order of maybe $300 or $400 more upfront than a gas water heater. It wasn't that much more. And we, up until now, we had been spending about, I think, on the order of $200 per year is what it was costing to heat the water for the house. And it was nice because it was on a separate meter, so I could see how much it was. Now it's all combined into the main house, so I'd have to track that and measure that separately somehow to know anymore. But
yeah, other questions for Dale?
I had another question. Had you ever considered getting a heat pump clothes dryer? That's something I was thinking about doing soon.
Yeah, I think that would be great. In fact, that's one of my projects. I keep modifying my existing conventional electric dryer. So first, quite a while ago now, I ducted the exhaust from it. Instead of dumping it outside, I dump it down into the basement by the heat pump water heater. So that's kind of half of a heat pump dryer. All I need to do next is duct the dry air from the water heater exhaust back up to the dryer. And the heat pump water heater, I believe it takes most of the humidity out in one pass. The temperature is still relatively warm. So if you're sending it warm air from the dryer, the exhaust air is still relatively warm. It didn't really cool the air down that much, so much as take the humidity, the moisture out of it. So I'm going to try to make a closed loop out of it and see what happens. It's not that expensive to play around that way. But if you need a new dryer, if we needed a new dryer, I would definitely be looking for a heat pump dryer. I was already shopping and looking at them, but I was just, well, the one we have already works. It's not broken yet. And the only cost is electricity to run it. So I didn't switch that yet, but that would eliminate the issue with the family about, being careful about when we can run the dryer, because it would be like running the water heater in the basement, which I don't really worry too much about. It's when it's running, it might be a couple 100 watts, 200 watts maybe once it's running. So heat pump dryer, clothes dryer, I think would be somewhere similar to that.
Yeah, that would be the last gas use that we have in the house. It's just the clothes dryer left. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I would definitely look for that. I mean, when you read about them, it's just like our family's expectations about how the house should work. They might have some expectations about how the clothes dryer should work. They want hot, fluffy clothes to come out. But the heat pump dryers, the clothes come out dry, but they're kind of cool, and they don't feel as dry when you first take them out.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dale?
Well, this is John Gorley again. As long as we're talking about heat pump dryers and water heaters, I wonder if you know when you buy one of those and install it just basically off the shelf, not customized the way you might. Don't they blow a lot of cold air into the house that you then have to heat with whatever kind of heating system you have for your house?
Yeah, so yeah, you definitely want to think about where you would install them. They're good for some things. They're not good in other situations. So they're good if you're out west somewhere and it's hot and you have a utility room that's heated by the attic. That would be perfect. Or if you're here and you have a basement that's relatively somewhat moist, it's great because it takes the humidity out of the air and the noise. It's constantly blowing air and it's just white noise. But you wouldn't want that in a hallway closet next to your kitchen or your bedroom. It would really depend on where you can install it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one complaint with those, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I guess we have time for one more question. Does anybody have a final question or? Well, thank you, Dale. This has been really interesting, and I really appreciate you kind of giving us your solar story. And like I mentioned before, you know, our annual meeting for GLREA is coming up December 5th. We got a great program with Dan Scripps, Jigger Shaw, and a panel of solar industry folks. And you know, if you're interested, just go to the glrea.org website and you can register there for the meeting. This year we're gonna, in some ways it's kind of great because since it's virtual, it enabled us to get Jigger Shaw, who's a nationally known expert, to kind of participate in an annual meeting. So that's it's kind of a unique situation for us. Well, thanks everybody, and look forward to, now we are off next week for Thanksgiving, and we'll have another solar story the Thursday after Thanksgiving. Thanks to everybody for coming.
Right.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Yep.
Thank you.